Hello, and thank you for joining us. We're so excited to be here. I'm Mayan, and this is Sid. And today we're going to talk about moving Windows management to the cloud. Now, there have been several other sessions earlier in the week that talked about modern management and co-management, and I'm guessing you've seen some of those. So what we're planning to do here is focus more on the how you should think about moving your Windows management to the cloud, less on the what, the why. We have a line of demos that we can't wait to show you. And I think what we'll do is we'll spend just a few minutes talking about what modern management is all about, kind of recapturing so we're all on the same page, and then we'll dive to the how. Okay, so what is modern management? If you look at the workplace of today, it's gone through some very significant changes over the last few years. There are some very clear characteristics for a traditional workplace. So that would be users typically working from the office, devices that are corporate owned, and then a set of IT processes that tend to be reactive, manual, and rely on a very robust on-prem infrastructure with tools like Config Manager and Group Policy. On the other end, if you look at mobile workplaces, modern workplaces, we're looking at users that work from anywhere, devices that are a mix of corporate and user-owned devices, and then IT processes that are lighter, simpler, and tend to rely on the cloud. Now, the evolution of Windows over the year and its management tools left it at a place where they are very powerful, very flexible, but also complex. And IT organizations are challenging themselves, asking how can I reimagine the PC estate in this modern mobile world? If you take the characteristics of mobile device management and apply to the PC estate, you really get these three main promises. One is about user enablement. So beyond allowing users to work from anywhere, there is also allowing users to choose the devices, the applications they want, and relying more on self-service capabilities. Users don't want to have to call help desk for everything that happens, like password recovery, BitLocker recovery. They want to be able to self-provision their devices. Then the second promise with modern management is leveraging the cloud. And that goes beyond just hosted services or infrastructure as a service. It's really about taking the power of the cloud and having the data that's there analyzed to your specific business needs, so that it can provide insights that allow more efficient, more effective IT. Take these two things together and you end up with simplified processes and essentially lowering the cost of managing and operating Windows. Now, Microsoft is offering a set of services through M365 that really light up all these promises around the life cycle of a device. So management capabilities, if you're starting from the bottom left, it starts with provisioning and deployment that is zero touch over the internet with Autopilot, and Sid is going to talk a lot about that. I'm sure you have heard about Autopilot this week. Continuing with the day-to-day management of the device. So configuration, policies, security, applications, and that's where Intune MDM comes in, store for business, advanced threat protection. Then continuing to keeping the device up to date with Windows Update for Business. And then finally, those proactive insights that we talked about through Windows Analytics and the solutions that it provides for device health, upgrade readiness, and so on. There are several paths that IT can take to get from current to this future cloud-based approach. So one approach is basically starting from the cloud, right? Startups, greenfield environments that are cloud-born, that's an easy one. You start with O365, MDM in the cloud, but the more challenging question that probably applies to most of you in the room is how do I transition my existing IT that is relying on these on-prem tools to the cloud? And there are several approaches that you can take there. One is what we call the big switch transition. What that means is you take everything that is related to end user computing. So beyond management, management is just one aspect. There is productivity and identity and authentication and updates. You take all of that and you move that to the cloud, and that is an approach that we have certainly seen as success stories in several organizations, but many other organizations are looking for a more iterative approach, something that they can do more in a step-by-step way. Which brings us to the bottom two options. So one is group by group. In a group by group approach, what you do is you would identify sets of users or devices that are a more natural fit for cloud management. So those could be your VDI clients, your kiosk devices, or just users that are typically on the go, like the sales team, and you modernize them. Now, with that approach, you still need to eventually think about how you modernize the rest of your device and user population, which then brings us to the bottom option, which is co-management. We announced co-management earlier in the week, and what co-management does is it essentially creates a bridge between traditional and modern in the sense that it allows both these paradigms to coexist, and we'll talk about how. All right, so this is a very simplified architectural view of co-management. And by the way, what I'm going to focus on in this session is co-management in the sense of Config Manager and Intune. You could definitely get value off of co-management without Config Manager with just group policy and Intune MDM. But for now, we're going to focus on co-management, meaning Config Manager, SCM, and Intune. So what you're seeing here is your Windows 7 and 8 devices can continue to be managed by Config Manager, same as today. Your mobile devices can continue to be managed by Intune. The interesting part here is at the bottom, where your Windows 10 devices are managed by both Config Manager and Intune at the same time. Now, what IT would do now is gradually start to move workloads from Config Manager over to Intune at the pace and the order that makes sense to them. And it really eliminates that risk in having to move away from things that you have been doing until now. Instead, it builds on top of that and leverages all the existing investments. So the next question you may be asking yourselves is, how do I get to co-management? And the answer is split into two. There is the existing devices that are currently managed by Config Manager, typically domain joined, and then there are the new devices. For existing devices, there is a simple onboarding experience from the Config Manager console, and I'll show you that in a minute. And what that does is it Azure AD joins your existing domain joined devices. So you end up with devices that are both domain joined and Azure AD joined. Then it auto enrolls into Intune, and then you end up with these four things: domain joined, Azure AD joined, Intune enrolled, and Config Manager managed. Now for your new devices, through our autopilot integration with Intune, you end up through autopilot with a device that is both domain joined and Azure AD joined. It then enrolls into Intune, and what happens next is Intune can bootstrap the SCCM client. And if you have SCCM client management over the internet with a client management gateway, then again, you can end up in the exact same state where devices have these four things. They're domain joined, they're Azure AD joined, they're Config Manager managed, and they're Intune managed. So this is a conceptual diagram for how you could think about transitioning to the cloud. Now, it's not a recipe, and each of you may be doing it differently, but there are a few things to note here. One is that management, or the management tools that you're using, are just one aspect of end user computing. When you think about moving end user computing to the cloud, there is a lot that you need to think about, including productivity, O365, and authentication, and identity, and replacing imaging. And so your management tool is just one layer there. And co-management is really you can think about it as the orchestration that allows you to run these things in parallel. So that's one thing to note. Your order may vary, your timeline may vary. The other thing is you may be seeing the January 2020 date. Anyone in the room guesses for why that's there? Yeah, exactly. That's end of life for Win 7 extended support. And so again, it's not a specific timeline, and you may be done with your transition to the cloud ahead of that, but that would definitely drive momentum for a lot of move to Windows as a service in organizations that haven't already adopted this model. All right, so what we'll do next is we're gonna zoom in on some of these building blocks, not all of them, but some, and show you how you can think about transitioning those to the cloud. And we'll start with the device identity. So a slightly more technical slide. In most cases, you would start in a traditional environment with devices that are domain joined, on-prem domain joined. And eventually you want to end up with devices that are Azure AD joined. The interim state, and really what we need for co-management, is a device that is hybrid Azure AD joined. That means, again, it's on-prem domain joined and Azure AD joined. In this state, beyond enabling co-management, the benefit is both for the end user and for IT. For the end user, that means that they can keep their domain identity, and at the same time, benefit from advanced capabilities in the cloud, like single sign-on for Azure applications. For IT, it means that they can continue to manage through group policy for as long as they need it, while being able to manage MDM policies with Intune. In order to get from a domain joined population to this hybrid Azure AD joined state, what you need to do is basically make sure you have Azure AD set up with AAD Connect, and then go through this simple onboarding experience from SCCM that I'll show you. Even if you don't have SCCM, there is a simple set of steps that you can do to get your devices to this hybrid state. Now, you may be asking yourselves, okay, this is an interim state. How do I eventually get to only Azure AD joined devices? And to do that, you need to answer two questions. One is, do I still have dependencies on GPO? If I still have dependencies on GPO, then I would need to gradually move them to MDM. The second is, do I still rely on authentication that's based on the device on-prem identity? If the answer to both these questions is no, then for my new devices, I can start to only Azure AD join them. All right, so let's try to see what that looks like. Okay, this is my config manager console, and you can see that we've added a new node here for co-management. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to sign into my Intune account. And the reason that I'm going to do that is config manager and Intune in a co-management state need to talk to each other to make sure there are no conflicts. They make sure that per IT decision, only one of them controls any given policy. We'll see how we do that too. Okay, so I'm gonna borrow Brad Anderson's environment. Okay, I signed in to my Intune tenant. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to opt into co-managing my devices. I can choose whether I do that just for a pilot population at first or for all my devices. Can you see in the back? Do I need to zoom in? I'll try that once. So I can choose whether I only do that for a pilot or for all of my devices. So I'm going to go with all. What you see at the bottom, this long command line, is going to come in later. This is the command line that I can copy to have Intune bootstrap SCCM to the right environment. But I'm going to skip that for now because we're going to talk about it when we talk about the new devices. Now we're going through the flow for existing devices. All right, this is the interesting part. This is where I get to choose which workloads I'm starting to transition to the cloud. I, as the IT admin, am the one in control. So by just selecting in the first screen onboarding to co-management, all that means is that my existing devices are Azure AD joined and enrolled into Intune, but the control is still in Config Manager. Intune will have no control over these devices. I will be able to see them in the Intune console, but that's it. I didn't risk anything that I'm doing today. It didn't change anything, and it's seamless for the end user. So here I'm starting to choose which workloads to move control over to Intune. So I'm going to move over compliance policies. What that means is that Intune can now assess compliance on my devices per the policies defined in Intune. And that gives me immediate value because I can start to build things like conditional access on top of that in Intune. The three workloads that we are exposing with the first release of co-management are those that you're seeing here. So compliance policies, resource access policies, and Windows update policies. And you may have noticed that for compliance policies, I only chose to do that for a pilot. So I'm still assessing what it looks like for compliance policies to move over. So I'm only doing that for my pilot collection. And I'm going to need to define what that pilot collection is. So I'm selecting my pilot group here. I can also define an exception, an exclusion group for co-management. If I have mission-critical devices that I don't want to mess with, exec devices, I can do that. I can define a collection to exclude from co-management all up and change that later. And that's it. I'm done. So I've onboarded my devices to co-management, and let's see what that looks like in the Intune console. All right. So this is my Intune console. And you can see when I look at devices, there is the long list of all devices that are managed by Intune. There is the managed by column. And if I scroll down, you'll see that some of them are managed by MDM and Config Manager. These are my co-managed clients. So I'm going to filter just for those. And I'm going to see my co-managed devices now, and you'll see an interesting thing if it loads. When I look at my compliance column, you can see that some of them have compliance. So this one's at the top is not compliant, and I see these that are compliant. But for a lot of them, I see a C config manager value. And the reason for that is I only moved compliance to Intune for my pilot collection, right? I only did that for some of my devices. Most of my devices still have config manager controlling the compliance policies and assessment. So if I look at this device that's still managed by config manager for compliance, and I try to look at device compliance, I'm going to get a message that says, sorry, this device compliance is managed by config manager. But if I take a look at this device that already has compliance moved over to Intune, then I can see the details of the compliance, and I can drill down and see the policy. So just like I do for any device that's Intune managed and that's entirely integrated into the Intune experience in the console. All right, for the end user experience, we said that onboarding is completely seamless to them. They're not even gonna know that anything happened. But you can see here that on the client, I have both Company Portal and Software Center, so both Intune and SCCM. And if they happen to go to Company Portal and try to do something that's not yet managed by Intune, there is a simple message there that takes them directly to the SCCM UI. So in this case, if I try to look at applications and applications are still managed by Config Manager, it's just gonna have a link there that takes me directly to the relevant UI in Software Center. All right, so I onboarded my existing devices to co-management. The next thing that I want to start thinking about is how I move away from imaging to zero-touch provisioning, and Sid is going to walk you through that.
Great, thanks, Mayan. Right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, someone get some coffee in here. My name is Sid. I'm a program manager in Windows Enterprise, and one of the things my team built is called Windows Autopilot. So let's dive straight in. Okay, the way everyone in the room is used to deploying new Windows devices is you create your golden custom image, you gather your drivers, your apps, your settings, your policies, and you got to maintain this golden image for every device you support. This is expensive, it's complicated, it makes the task of deploying a new device unnecessarily arduous. The point is, Windows 10 was built from the get-go in such a way that it's highly malleable and ductile, and you can morph a standard off-the-shelf Windows Pro device that you purchase from your OEM into your business-ready state on the fly, and you don't have to wipe and replace Windows. I mean, in many ways, if you think about it, you're buying a machine that comes preloaded with Windows, so you spend money on that. Then you're spending some more time and effort and money on blowing away the Windows that came pre-installed, and you spend some more time and money and effort on putting pretty much the same Windows back on the device. It just doesn't make sense. So we built Windows Autopilot with this notion of when you buy a new machine, just send it straight away to your employee and have the employee self-provision, or what we call a self-service deploy the device. If you try and do that, from an operating system point of view, like I said, Windows is very malleable. It will support morphing itself into a compliant state with your settings, your policies, your applications, your requirements. But that self-service experience is fraught with some issues. You know, the employee who's going through the setup experience, or the out-of-box experience as we call it, I gotta have line of sight. Or maybe the battery's dying. Oh. The employee's gotta accept the EULA. Most organizations don't want their employees accepting licensing agreements. The employees have to make some reasonably complicated decisions, such as, is this a home machine or a work machine? Do you wanna set it up with Azure AD, or do you wanna set it up with a local account? Do you want to choose, you know, what privacy settings you want? Do you want to do OEM registration of the device? Do you want to set up OneDrive? Do you want to set up Cortana? What happens is, as soon as you have your employees go through this experience, one of two things will most likely occur. They're probably going to call up IT help desk and say, what am I supposed to do next? Or they might just end up going down the wrong path, and they might make a wrong selection or a wrong decision. What Windows Autopilot does is it takes this complicated decision-making out of the equation as far as the employee experience of setting up a new machine goes. Autopilot enables IT to make those decisions for the users, and it goes well and above beyond that because it also enables IT to completely customize that setup experience so your employees can be successful at setting up a new machine with just a few simple clicks. The last point is, most organizations want their employees to have standard accounts on a corporate-owned machine. Every employee or any user who goes through the Windows 10 out-of-box experience always ends up with an administrator account, because think about it, it's the first user on the machine. That's got to be an administrator, because you've got to have one admin on the machine. Windows Autopilot enables IT to restrict the user who goes through the setup out-of-box experience to a standard account. In fact, that's the only known way that you can have the user who goes through the out-of-box setup experience be limited to a standard account if you want that to happen on your corporate machines. So let's take a look at what the employee experience is like. The employee unpacks the machine from shrink wrap, powers on, selects language and keyboard, connects to a network. This can be any network, which means that you don't have to be inside your corporate environment. You don't have to be inside your office to be able to do this. You could be sitting in Starbucks. We support captive portals in the out-of-box experience, so you can connect to any network anywhere in the world and go through this. So in my case, I'm going to connect to my work guest network, since this is a brand new machine. We support captive portals. So once I'm connected to the network, something magical is going to happen. The device is going to go talk to the autopilot service, and the autopilot service is going to tell the machine, look, you're special. You're no longer an ordinary off-the-shelf machine. And that's where this magical experience of the device knowing it belongs to an organization, it provides this customized sign-in experience, it provides the company's logo, provides the company's name, and that way your employee knows, whatever she is doing, she's on the right path. She can't go wrong, because clearly the device is saying it belongs to my organization. So all the employee does is enters their AAD email address, enters the password, and so if you think about it, all the employee had to do is select language and keyboard, enter their AAD credentials, and that's it, you're done. So just 2 primary steps to get the machine completely deployed into a business-ready state. Your line of business apps are installed, your office apps are installed on the machine is ready for productivity. At this point of time, the device is also configured with OneDrive. All of your files that you've put into OneDrive will start syncing. You're not an admin, Anna's not an admin, otherwise it would say administrator over there in the UI. The red text over there proves the fact that Anna's not an admin. The device is enrolled in Azure AD as well as managed by Intune at this point of time. And then lastly, what we'll take a look at is the fact that you started off with an OEM off-the-shelf machine, which means it came pre-installed with Windows Pro, and you want to step it up to Windows Enterprise. Normally, you do that using product keys, you do that using an on-prem activation server you set up. You don't have to do that anymore. You can manage your Windows Enterprise licenses just like you manage O365, and the machine will step up from Pro to Enterprise just based on the logon of the AAD user. There are no product keys, there is no re-imaging, there are no reboots, there's no on-prem activation server. You don't have to manage the count of the activations or the licenses you have in the cloud. This just happens seamlessly. Once the user logs on, it probably takes something on the order of about 3 to 4 seconds for the machine to just step up from Pro to Enterprise. And it's running a subscription. So if and when this device leaves your organization and you rescind the license assigned to that AAD user, the machine will just revert back to Pro after a reasonable amount of grace period. So let's kind of go over how does this work. The way this works is the end goal is the brand new machine is shipped directly to the employee and the employee self-deploys. For that to happen, when you purchase new machines, you get this list of device IDs. Sometimes we call them hardware hashes because they're effectively a thumbprint of the hardware. So device ID, hardware hash, I might swap back and forth, they mean the same thing. So you get this list of device IDs from your device vendor whenever you purchase new machines and they get fulfilled. You go and upload those device IDs into the autopilot service. As soon as you upload them, effectively you've claimed ownership of those devices. At that point of time, you go configure your autopilot configuration. And so you choose things like, I want to make certain decisions on behalf of the user. I don't want to bother the user with accepting the EULA. I don't want my user to choose privacy settings. I don't want them to deal with Cortana and OneDrive setup. They don't have to register the OEM registration. And I don't want them to be administrators on the devices. So you get this autopilot profile configured. Now you can assign the profile to the devices. You can also set a specific profile as a default. So once you've set it up as a default, every time new devices come in, all of those profiles just get applied to the devices automatically. Once you're done with that, all the employee has to do is unbox, power on, connect to the network. That's it. And then enter their AAD user email address and password. So one of the questions we keep getting asked is, geez, what's this experience for configuring this autopilot profile? And I'm going to walk you through something that is built brand new, where you can use your Intune console to configure this autopilot profile. And I'm not as brave as Mayan is, so I'm not going to do a live demo. I have just recorded a video, but this is actual production code. It's working. It's available for you to try out. And so I'm going into Intune right now. I'm going to go choose autopilot to create my deployment profile. I'm going to create a new profile. I can give it a name. And then I'm going to choose what settings I want as a part of my autopilot experience. And so I want Azure AD join devices. I don't want to show privacy settings. I want the user account to be a standard account. Once I've done that, I can now assign this profile to the devices that I have in my autopilot service. These are the devices that you have claimed ownership for by using the device ID list that you got from your OEM or from your device vendor. So at this point, I'm choosing the devices that I want to apply my autopilot profile to. I have some devices already uploaded. To be able to test this, you can use a VM if you want, or you can use an existing machine. We have a PowerShell script that Michael Niehaus actually authored. It's available for you to download, and you can extract that device ID or the hardware hash using that PowerShell script and upload it into the autopilot service. All of this you can do today, and you can test the entire process out. We have hundreds of customers already piloting and testing this over the last few months. So the next thing I want to talk about is a lot of feedback we've received over the last few months is, geez, this process of getting the device ID from my hardware vendor and uploading it into autopilot just is really complex, or it's just far too manual. It just takes too much effort. And so with that in mind, we are building a new component or a new feature in the autopilot service wherein when you buy your machines, when you buy new devices from your OEM or from your vendor, they will automatically be able to upload those device IDs on your behalf and assign them to your Azure AD tenant. What that means is you don't have to do anything special. All you got to do is go purchase your machines just like you normally do. When your OEM fulfills those devices, they will show up in your autopilot portal automatically, and so you don't have to deal with getting this device ID CSV file and uploading it anymore. And we've been talking to a lot of our OEM partners, and we're really happy to announce the fact that we have Lenovo, HP, Fujitsu, Panasonic, and Toshiba, in addition to Microsoft Surface, announcing the fact that they will be a part of this autopilot service integration, and they'll get their supply chain integrated such that every time you purchase devices from any of these OEMs, those devices will show up in your autopilot portal automatically. Now, we've built the autopilot service in such a way that we'll be able to extend and scale the participation of hardware resellers over the next year or so to a level where almost every major reseller should be a part of the autopilot ecosystem. We're just starting out with these, and we're announcing these OEMs to begin with. Now, the other question we get asked very often is, geez, this is great. I'm able to use autopilot to get the seamless experience where I can get a device into an Azure AD join Intune managed state. But what if I'm not ready to be a pure Azure AD and pure Intune only shop yet? And that's fine, we understand. And Mayan talked about co-management, which she just showed the demo of. If you have existing machines that are domain joined, that are local Active Directory domain joined and SCCM managed, how to get them enrolled into Intune so that the devices are managed both by Intune as well as SCCM. What happens when you bring a new machine in? Because to get a new machine, local Active Directory domain join, it's impossible, or it's not been possible to do that using a self-service out-of-box experience that comes with Windows. You just can't do it. You have to create a local admin account on the box, and then you go into settings and you launch this wizard, and then you do your Active Directory domain join. So we're really happy to announce the fact that we will be enabling the ability for a brand new Windows 10 PC to use the autopilot service and the experience that it powers to get a machine into a local Active Directory domain join state such that it's co-managed both by SCCM as well as Intune. So let's take a look at what that experience looks like. So to configure your devices in autopilot so that they will be in this co-managed state where they are Active Directory domain join as well as Intune enrolled. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to choose Active Directory Azure AD join in my deployment profile, in my autopilot deployment profile. I need to configure a VPN because what we want to enable is you could be sitting anywhere in the world. You could be sitting in Starbucks and you will still be able to perform a local domain join and access your domain controller, which is on-prem. And so you need to configure a VPN that lands on the box before you complete the process of domain joining. Once you've created that profile and you've configured your VPN as a part of your autopilot deployment profile, the rest of the experience is more or less the same. And so let's take a look at what it looks like on the client. Now I want to call out one fact. You will see that banner on the top left corner that says prototype. What it means is this is not available yet to use, but what you saw is actual prototype code. So this is something we have line of sight on. We should be able to make it available very soon. The other part is if you have your device get set up with local Active Directory domain join, how do I get the SCCM client installed on the machine? And so you can use Intune to basically upload your config manager MSI into Intune. So Intune can install that config manager onto the machine as a part of the autopilot experience once your device ends up being managed by Intune. And there was this command line that Mayan showed a little earlier when she was doing her co-management settings in the SCCM console. You basically copy and paste that in here. In the future, we'll make this even better where you don't have to like manually copy and paste that command line. But once you're done with those two steps, configure your autopilot profile and then configure Intune to install the SCCM client on the box, all you got to do is go through the client experience just like you normally do with autopilot, power on the machine, go through your language and keyboard. So I'm going to skip through that really fast. You connect to any network. And as soon as you connect to the network, device recognizes it's managed by Contoso. And so it gives you that familiar branded sign-in experience. I sign in with my Azure AD or my federated credentials. As soon as that happens, what you'll see is at the time when you assigned this autopilot profile to the device for hybrid Azure AD join or co-managed setting, you created under the covers, you ended up creating an offline domain join blob for that device. So autopilot's going to deliver that offline domain join blob to the device. And so at this point of time, the device is offline domain join. So all that's left to do now is get the device connected to your corporate domain controller and finish that process of domain joining. So go from an offline domain join state to an online domain join state. So we need to reboot the machine because we just changed the name of the PC. Every time you change the name of the PC has to reboot. So the machine's going to reboot. It's going to come back. Now it's completely offline domain join with the correct name. It's going to use the VPN that was installed by Intune before the reboot on the box to connect to your corporate network. It has access to your domain controller. As soon as it has access to your domain controller, it completes that process of being local domain join. And then you can sign in to your experience. You can sign into your device using your domain credentials. So now I'm signing in with my domain credentials. This is the first time ever in the history of Windows that you can go through the setup experience out of box and get into a domain join state. The next thing that I want to talk about is a lot of feedback we've received is I don't want the user to get to the desktop unless a minimum specified state of policies, settings, and apps have landed on the box. Because I want to guarantee that the machine is indeed ready for productivity and is ready for employees to start doing their work. So we're planning on building that ability inside of the setup experience in Windows 10 where you can specify, here's my minimum baseline configuration, and until all of that takes effect, don't let the user get to the desktop. And so this will be a modal dialog. You can't escape out of it. You can't skip through it. And you can choose what your minimum configuration is. And until that lands on the box, the user will not be able to access the desktop. So the user is going to go through this. Once your minimum specified configuration has been applied to the machine, the user will end up on the desktop. And the line of business apps, the office apps, all of them are available. Now note that at this point of time, the device is local Active Directory domain joined, as well as managed by SCCM, as well as managed by Intune. So effectively, it's in this co-managed state, right from taking the machine out of the shrink wrap. I was hoping someone will clap at this point. Thank you. We're really excited because we've not been able to do this for many, many years, and we've finally been able to accomplish this. So I just want to wrap this up with Mayan showed how you can take your existing machines that are SCCM managed and you can get them connected to Intune and get them into co-managed state. What you saw right now is the blue box that just got added on the right side. It's a new machine that you deployed in this, local Active Directory domain joined state, also being co-managed. The other interesting part is the first autopilot UX that I went through, where you took a device, a new machine, and got it enrolled in Intune using Azure AD join. You can also get that machine on the left side be co-managed by adding SCCM management to that machine. And so we're giving you the flexibility and the options where you can take a new machine and be on the right side if you want everything consistent with your existing devices as they are, or you can take a new machine and put it in the left side, the left blue computer icon, where the machine is Azure AD join. It has nothing to do with your corporate domain controller. It is managed by Intune, but you may want to choose your pace at which you move workloads from SCCM into Intune. And if you want to choose that pace, then you can have your Azure Active Directory domain joined device managed by Intune also be co-managed by SCCM. And then the yellow colored workloads, you can start moving them from your on-prem infrastructure into the cloud at your own pace. But the point is you have the flexibility using Autopilot to put your devices into either of those left or the right sides as it suits you. Okay, next up I'm going to talk about managing Windows updates and what does that transition look like from WSUS to WUFB. WUFB stands for Windows Update for Business. Kind of sounds weird when I say WUFB. It reminds me of my dog. So what needs to change? The way you've been traditionally doing or managing Windows updates is they happen kind of once in 3 years, the major OS upgrades when you went from Vista to Win 7. A lot of you probably never went to Vista in the first place. So you went to Win 7, then Win 8, and so on. Windows 10 is different, and we just have to start thinking about it in a completely different way, where the updates are more frequent. We have at least 2 major feature updates every year. We've aligned those updates with Office so that those kind of go consistent hand in hand. And what that means is there are existing tools available. You may be using WSUS or you may be using Config Manager, and that's great. We continue supporting those. But if you want to use the cloud to manage and deploy your updates, you can just use the primary source from where all of these updates land on devices. I mean, we manage hundreds of millions of Windows 10 consumer devices, so we have the largest, biggest update service, and we've made it such that you can leverage that update service to actually control and manage and deploy all of your corporate devices. You have the controls that you have today with SCCM or with WSUS. We've made those controls available even with using Windows Update, and that's what we call Windows Update for Business. It's basically Windows Update with additional controls for how you manage the speed and the velocity at which you deploy your updates to your corporate-owned devices. Now, there's a few things that you want to think about. The first one is choose your insider PCs. Be a part of the Windows Insider program. Get those new Windows builds as early as possible and start testing it out. And that way, you're kind of moving at the same pace at which we're moving as we build and develop these products. And we do a pretty good job at getting new insider builds dished out at a very high frequency so that you are able to keep up with all of the feature innovation we are building into Windows as we think about Windows as a service. The second step is make sure you've identified your mission critical PCs, and you want to be very careful which PCs these are, which computers you deem as mission critical. In general, the computers that are running Office, they're not mission critical if they're running Windows Office. That means you're using it for productivity. Your mission critical devices are devices that are running in the factory and controlling the robots, or the devices that are running your ATM machines and so on. But identify those and put those on what we call as a long-term servicing branch, so that you keep them as tightly controlled as possible, and your mission critical services keep running without any issues. The third step is recruit volunteers who will test new Windows builds before you actually deploy them en masse. Now, it's really important you choose the right users, because you don't want people doing your pilots who are going to escalate as soon as there's a problem. You actually want people who are doing pilots in your organization that will actually report issues as and when they find them. So you want these volunteers willing to go and test this out and provide actionable feedback for you to take action on it as an organization before you actually roll out the update to the rest of your org. And then divide your broad population into logical groups wherein you can tightly control and manage one phase or one group at a time and roll out your updates in a controlled fashion. The next thing is, as you think about modernizing your management and moving it into the cloud, you have a bunch of group policies that are controlling your environment today, that are making sure your PCs are compliant. How do you move that over to the MDM? Or how do you move that to Intune and use MDM policies? So we have this tool, we call it the MDM Migration Analysis Tool. Sometimes we call it MMAT. Every time I hear that, I get reminded of my GMAT. So it sounds like an exam. So it's not that complicated. It's not an exam, by the way. It's not a test. It's an easy to use tool which can help you easily map the group policies that you're using today into what kind of MDM CSP policies that you need to leverage, so that you have that consistent set of configurations applied to the device and your devices remain compliant. The next thing is security baselines. We plan to publish our security baselines as and when we roll out our feature updates. There's a link that we've included in the deck, so that you can actually apply those security baselines to your devices as and when you start upgrading your machines to the latest version of Windows. And we've made it such that it'll be possible for Intune or for MDM to automatically apply those security baselines, and for you to easily adopt those without having to think about tweaking and configuring hundreds of policies. If you want to just follow the Microsoft recommended security baseline, you should be able to take that as a template and just apply it really easily into your devices. All right, with that, that's everything I had. I'm going to hand it back to Mayan. Now you clap.
All right, so the last part that we're going to talk about is applications. How do you take your applications and gradually move those to the cloud? So the first thing to remember is that the future of Windows applications is in the store. Microsoft Store for Business is the place that you want to start thinking about moving your applications to, with tools like Desktop Bridge. But as you're doing that, we realize that it's a long journey. We realize that it's going to take a long time for many of you, both because you have a lot of Win32 applications and because you don't always have control over third-party applications and when they become available in this store. And so while you're doing that, here are a few recommendations for how you can manage your legacy Win32 applications. So first of all, we talked a lot about co-management. In a co-managed environment, and in fact, in any environment where you have Config Manager continues to be the best tool to manage Win32 applications. It has the rich application model with a variety of technologies and dependencies, supersedence, and so on. And so in a co-management environment, definitely continue to use Config Manager. to manage your Win32 line of business applications. The question is, what happens in a cloud-only environment where I don't have config manager? And so a couple of things. First of all, Intune MDM today already, and for a while, supports distributing MSI applications, Win32 applications, but specifically for single MSI. So that's something that's available today, and you can do that. What we announced earlier in the week is the addition of the Intune management extension. Raise your hand if you heard us talk about it. So, okay, just a few. Intune management extension is basically a tool that comes with Intune that allows an Intune admin to deploy and run PowerShell scripts on any Win10 Intune managed device, which practically gives you the flexibility to do anything that you can do with PowerShell on those devices, and I want to show you a demo of that. Okay, so I'm going to go to device configuration. And you can see this new option here for PowerShell scripts. This is where I manage the Intune management extension. And I'm going to go here. You see that there are a few scripts that were already created, but let's go ahead and create a new one. I can select my PowerShell script. And then there are a couple of additional configuration settings that I can choose from. So I can choose to run the script with the logged on credentials or the system credentials. That's one thing. And I can also choose to enforce the signature check, which means that the script execution would fail otherwise. So I'm going to do that. And once my script is created, I can go ahead and assign it, just like I assign any application or policy in Intune. I can select groups. So I'm going to select my Intune management extension group. And my script is assigned. So you can see here that my demo script is created and it is assigned. Now, it could take up to an hour for the client to pick up and run the script. So this is a different interval from what it uses for policies. It's quicker, it's every hour. But I have a script here that has already been deployed. And so just to walk you through the monitoring experience, I can go to device status. And I can see the devices where this script was deployed and ran, and I can see that it was successful in a couple of them and failed on one. Through Graph API, I can actually get more information than this on the actual script failure and what it returned. So that's the Intune management extension. The other thing that I want to show you while we're here is how I deploy and run Office ProPlus. So I'm going to go to my Intune applications. And you can see that there's one already created, but again, I'll go ahead and walk you through the experience of creating a new application. So we've added an Office ProPlus option in the application type. That's something that's available today in the Intune console, and you can start using it. I can choose the specific applications that I want to deploy. So I'm going to go with everything. I can then go ahead and provide the basic information like I do for any Intune application. So this is my Office ProPlus. And then I also have some settings that are very specific to Office. I can choose whether it's a 32 or a 64-bit version. I can also select the update channel, whether it's monthly or semi-annual and so on. I can accept the end user license agreement on behalf of the user and use shared computer activation. And then the last thing that I can do is I can choose which OS languages to install. So I'm just going to select a few. And that's it. Again, I go through the same Intune experience and assign that. One thing to note about this specific experience, though, is it's currently designed specifically for a clean machine scenario, so the autopilot sort of scenario. We will, in the future, add support for a scenario where you already have an MSI version of Office deployed. This currently works for a new machine. All right, we have several other sessions today and tomorrow that we'd encourage you to go watch. And if you missed any of the sessions on the slide, you can, of course, watch the recording to get a little more on transitioning to the cloud and the new services. Some of them we went deeper on today, and some of them we just touched on. And we have quite some time for questions, so if you have a question, please approach the mic.
Up where the end user does not have to accept the end user license, but that comes up before they join the network. I've seen this in all the demos. So the end user license acceptance is coming up before they connect to the network. Until they connect to the network, they're not getting the policies. How are you working that out?
For the autopilot scenario?
Yes.
Actually, it's a really good question. So the question is, the Windows licensing agreement, the EULA page in the out-of-box experience, used to show up before the network connection page.
Right, well, in your demos, it's still showing up there.
Yeah, so as of the 1709 release of Windows 10, which is an insider preview today, we have actually changed the sequence where the Windows EULA in the out-of-box experience will come after network connection, and that's how, using autopilot, we're able to have IT accept that. But that's a really good question.
Thank you.
It's available in the 1709 release.
Yes, in the back.
Not so much. Oh, hi. We have a fairly large number of applications, say about 800, which are deployed with a configuration manager. About half of them are AppV applications. Is there any plans for Intune to be supporting the deployment of AppV applications in a similar way that it does support MSI?
So we don't have any plans to share on that right now. I can say that it's something that we've heard a lot of feedback about. So it's definitely on our radar, but nothing to share at this point.
Okay, thanks.
I wanted to ask about in the autopilot scenario, you mentioned that for the local domain join, that it creates a VPN connection. Is that something that it uses just for that domain join and then removes, or does that stay on the machine after that?
We don't remove it unless you explicitly choose to remove it.
So there is an option to remove the VPN connection then?
It's something I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a really good question. I can get back to you. My email address will be in the deck. Feel free to connect with me.
Okay.
Unless, Michael, do you know this? Okay. It's a really good question. I can get back to you on that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks. There's a lot of great new tools here. Can I challenge you with one tool? Sell it to the customer tool. It's really great here. All of us are probably really great, but customers are like, this is new, this is hard. They're always scared of change.
Right.
A presentation to put on a web page to sell to the customer.
A presentation to what?
To put on a website, internal company website that was already pre-made up and fancy, so we can sell this idea to the customers that we have.
Yeah, so
That's the hardest part of IT, is getting buy-in from the non-technical customer. They're used to having it's a wonderful idea there, and it'll save me a lot of time and effort, but they're used to having a technician tell them it's here. And they'll actually be afraid of doing it themselves because they'll think they can't do it.
So you're basically proposing a friendly web page beyond documentation to just say, hey, end user, this is what you're going to get.
This is what it's going to look like. Look how awesome it is.
This is great feedback. Yeah, we'll definitely think of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Back in the back. Hey, we've got,
Who's
I love everything you've been doing. It's awesome. We've been doing a lot of the automation and everything for quite a while, but I've got a lot of PowerShell scripts. And so I really keyed in when you said about the presentation, being able to push a PowerShell script down to the computer. My biggest question is, are you going to add, or do you already have the ability to point that at a Git repository? Because version control is key. And then also, if not, because I assume not right now, is there an API that lets us create and manage those PowerShell scripts, because I can create webhooks?
Right, so right now what we've seen is basically it. You can select a PowerShell script. We don't go beyond that into the script management. We are continuing to develop the Intune management extension, and what's on our radar right now is adding things like content distribution. Right now, basically what's in the script is what you get, and we're looking to be able to download content with that. So these are all things that we're looking into, and keep that feedback coming.
Well, I was really referring to if I deploy a PowerShell script to the computer, like what you had demoed, right? And so I can't just, is there an API system for managing that? Is there not?
Well, everything that you have in the console is available through Graph API, if that's the question. So you can definitely do that through the Intune Graph API.
Everything in the console?
Yes, everything in the console.
Fantastic, thank you.
Available now?
That's in preview right now. If you want to be added to the preview, then let us know. It's going to be available in a few weeks, so really just a matter of weeks. We're looking at Intune 17.10 to release this.
So to get into the preview, let's say I wanted to try it next week.
Send me an email.
Okay, and your email's in the deck?
Yeah, should be. It's my first name at Microsoft.
All right, very good, thanks.
So running the PowerShell scripts, we have a lot of EXEs. And so we put all that information in those PowerShells. Will those EXEs also be downloaded with those scripts, or is it just the PowerShell script alone?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was referring to earlier. Right now, it's a PowerShell script alone. So if you want to do that, you'd need to embed the content within the PowerShell script. But we're definitely looking at expanding and adding this capability. EXEs are a very strong ask from a lot of customers, complex MSIs as well. So it's definitely something that we're looking
Because that's something we will need. And also, I'm on the line with the App V. We have a lot of App V apps that we will need to get in there as well.
All right, we hear you.
Far right over here.
Oh, we missed you.
Yeah, hi. I'm brand new to Intune. I know nothing about it. We have different teams managing different parts of our infrastructure. Is it very granular as far as management with different role-based usage?
Yeah, Intune provides role-based administration. You can go online and read on that, but that's something that we've added as part of the Intune move to the Azure portal. So we moved from the older Intune console to the Azure portal, and role-based administration is part of that.
Any of these sessions talk about that at all?
About role-based administration, I don't think so. Does anyone? I don't think so, but it's been available now for a while, and you have online docs to read.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Regarding the autopilot, what happens if you have to connect to your VPN before you get to the corporate infrastructure where all the application data gets downloaded?
The question is, what happens if you have to connect to the corporate network to get your applications?
Yeah, in other words, we are remote. Let's say somebody's sitting in a coffee shop. The only way they're going to be able to connect to the corporate network through the coffee shop is by initiating a VPN connection.
Right, so it's possible to use your management tool such as Intune to install the VPN client on the machine and get it configured once your device is enrolled into Intune. So in the situation where your device is in that co-managed state, once your device is enrolled by Intune, Intune can help you get your VPN connections configured on the box and get you connected to corporate network.
So that means that Intune is going to launch the VPN software when it recognizes it has to get to the other side?
I think it's a decision you make as an IT administrator on what you want to configure on the machine. So it's really kind of a decision you control.
And Sid was talking earlier about the option from Autopilot to go into co-management with hybrid Azure AD join. So co-management in general is going to be available with Config Manager 17.10 and the next Windows version and Intune timeline that aligns with that. Specifically, the piece of domain joining over the internet, over VPN is going to come a little later. That was the preview, or I'm not sure what terminology you used for that, but that's coming a little later.
Thank you.
Yes.
So my question centers around user state migration. So it's kind of cool to see that you can provision a new device for someone, out of the box experience. But unless someone is being onboarded, they're going to have files and settings, on their old PC, and I'm not hearing, or maybe I missed how the files and the settings would get onto the new PC. Because right now we just use a task sequence for that.
So you're talking about an in-place migration?
Yeah, well, for a PC refresh, traditional scenario is, you run the capture state on the old computer and then you restore it on the new computer. But if you're provisioning this through autopilot, the apps will come down, but what happens to their settings and their files from the old computer if you're getting them a new computer?
So I think it's a really good question. It's something that we've debated and to be honest, struggled a little bit with. I think the solution over there really is, and that's one of the reasons why in that demo I had that OneDrive piece pop up. The solution we envisage is that all of your existing data, so let's talk about data, all of your existing data gets backed up into OneDrive, and as soon as you get a new machine, you can use Intune, and you can use Autopilot and Intune to configure OneDrive on your new machine such that all of your data starts hydrating from the cloud. It has several advantages apart from the fact that it's easy to get a new machine and get all of your data on it. Your data is backed up in the cloud, and if your hard drive dies or something bad happens, you lose your machine, your data is always available in the cloud. So we think of that data migration to be basically backed by OneDrive. That's how we pitched it. Settings, apps, configuration, etc. All of those things, all the non-data, stateful stuff that you want to land on the machine, that we expect that you would define in Intune or SCCM if you're co-managed, and it would be those management tools that take care of applications, settings, policies, configuration.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
In Autopilot, with loading those hardware hashes and everything, I'm mandated to be able to surplus equipment at end of life. Is there a way to unown the device and then give it out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we do have the ability for an IT admin to deprovision devices from Autopilot. That can happen when a device is end of life in your organization and you plan to get it out and sublease it or sell it or whatever. Or some organizations even give their employees the ability to just buy the device out with the residual depreciated value left on the machine. So anytime that happens, or machine gets stolen or whatever, you can deprovision the machine. In fact, the scenario where the machine breaks down within your servicing warranty period and the machine goes back to the OEM you purchased it from, so let's say you purchased from Lenovo, we'll have the ability where Lenovo can deprovision a device which it had originally provisioned into Autopilot when it fulfilled an order. If that device comes back to Lenovo for servicing, we're going to give Lenovo the ability to deprovision it automatically. So at least for in-service devices, you don't have to bother about going and explicitly deprovisioning it, but you will have that ability.
Okay, thank you.
Just a real quick note on going back to the scripts again. Is WScript, like VB, part of that, the roadmap on that at all, or?
It's just PowerShell for now.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about was with when we're binding back to local AD, I might have missed it in the slide, but you had mentioned the machine name. During that bind, if there's no pre-existing object, it's just going to end up in root of computers, like in the root of computers in the domain. Does that make sense? Like, I didn't see you actually get to name that machine, and then usually what we'll do is name a machine based on region and department, put it into a specific OU,
right?
And then we do the bind, so it ends up somewhere that we expect it to.
Yeah, that's a great point. We will add the ability via Autopilot to actually define a naming schema. And so you will have the ability to define a particular naming schema for your devices. That's completely separate from the offline domain joining. But then once you have the ability to define a naming schema and apply that naming schema to the device, you can connect that with the over-the-air local domain join feature, and those two will just seamlessly work together. It's something we're working on.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yes.
From service provider perspective, is it possible in this co-working management solution, multiple Intune tenants in one SCCM combination or not?
The short answer is no. It's a single Intune tenant, but we're looking to you, to our customers, to provide this feedback. So we started with a simple co-management experience. That's one example. The other example is, if you noticed, we only have a pilot or everything. So that's another thing that we're looking to our customers to provide the feedback. Do you need more granularity than that? So keep the feedback coming, and if we see that as a strong ask from a lot of organizations, we'll add it.
And from the version, it will be deployed with 7010 or with 8001?
Config Manager 1710, and then, yeah, the next Windows client, it has a dependency on the next version of Windows.
Okay, thanks.
Let's go to that extreme end as people are waiting.
Hello. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Any plans to support direct access connections? We don't have a click on it, put your username, password kind of connection. Direct access machine connection with certs and stuff right to our infrastructure via IPv6. Any plans for that with Autopilot?
We don't have any plans of doing that as of now. It's something that we can take as feedback and put it into our backlog and start evaluating if it's possible to provision direct access onto the machine using Autopilot.
And by the way, for all these questions where we say, oh, this is great feedback, and keep the feedback coming, if you're not familiar with our user voice website, we have a config manager and an Intune user voice website where you can submit ideas and vote on ideas of others, and we definitely look at that with every release. So it's a really good channel to continue to providing feedback to the product group.
Thanks.
Yes.
What would happen in an environment where there are proxies and login authentication before getting to the internet? Because it works great when you're sitting in Starbucks, but if you get the out-of-box experience in the corporate LAN, it's sometimes different to get to the internet.
This is definitely a problem, and we've received that feedback from several customers. There's a little bit of a chicken and egg. It's a brand new machine, and it's an off-the-shelf standard image. So it doesn't have any awareness of your corporate proxy settings. So we are trying to figure out whether we can build intelligence in the out-of-box code that just automatically detects proxy settings and helps devices that are inside the corporate network to do the Autopilot magic. This is something that's very high on our list of priorities, but we haven't solved it yet.
Thank you.
Yes, in the back.
The Intune management extension, is it like the sidecar, or can it now be applied to every enrolled device?
So Sidecar was the internal name that we used for it. Intune Management Extension is now the public name. So it is Sidecar. It can be applied to any Windows 10 device.
So you're no longer limited to the 7,000 devices
okay. So the 7,000 devices, that's something, I actually might have a hidden slide for it that I can try to find. The 7,000 limitation is for the Intune PC client. So Intune PC client is different from Sidecar. That's a client that we had that did not rely on MDM, where it actually still exists, and you can manage Windows 7, 8, and 10 devices with that. The PC client has a limitation of 7,000. The Sidecar, or Intune Management Extension, is really an addition to the native MDM channel. So the PC, the Win 10 PC, is managed through MDM, and the management extension adds capabilities on top of that, and that will continue to evolve with MDM. So unless you have a dependency on the capabilities for Windows 7 and 8, our recommendation is definitely that for your Windows 10 devices, you look into managing those with MDM with the management extension where needed.
Okay, and then one other quick question. If I have an existing 10,000 Windows 10 devices and I want to move them to the subscription licensing that we're talking about, is there a method to take an existing KMS licensed device and move it to the subscription license?
There absolutely is a way. I just want to be clear, there are a few prereqs. We actually had a session on it yesterday, so you should be able to find it and watch the video. Someone on my team delivered that session. Number one is it works on what we call as domain join ++ or domain join devices federated to or connected to Azure AD. It'll work on that, but you need to have purchased Windows Enterprise per user to qualify for this technology. And you need to have a Pro product key in the device, because it's a licensing, it's a business requirement that if you want to run Windows Enterprise, you must start with Pro. So you want that Pro product key in the device firmware when the device is manufactured. So as long as that exists, you can actually very easily transition your existing devices over to Enterprise subscription.
So the previous method obviously was we changed the product key. You're talking about the actual firmware key.
That's
so
right.
As long as it has the firmware key, low-level firmware key, doesn't matter what we did at the product level to flip it to enterprise, we can go back and use subscription. We just have to buy that SKU that you were talking about.
Yeah,
on
you need to have
Monday.
purchased Windows Enterprise per user. We sell Windows Enterprise per device as well as per user.
Right.
So you want per user, or if you've purchased M365, Microsoft 365 is per user,
Right.
and it includes the subscription feature.
Okay, we have that. So I just need to do the SKU part. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
We're out of time, but Sid and I are going to stay here and take any questions that we didn't get to answer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.